Hello and welcome to a weekly update. Apologies for being a day late. I did record one yesterday and then hadn't posted it, and of course by the time I looked to post it, it's out of date. So I thought I'd update it and we'll look at what's going on. It's basically the same thing, but a few hours later. So here we go. So the euro dollar. Before I get on and talk about the technicals, let's have a look at the fundamentals. And this morning we've already seen the bank stress test results out for the Bank of England. These were likely to create some volatility, but they ironically seemed to around about 6 o'clock. So I don't know whose friends were giving the ideas around about that time. But anyway, they, as it happened, the basic in summary, it looks like there's no problems with any of the banks, and they should weather any uncertainty or disorderly exit from Brexit. So there we go. I bet old Bob Carney didn't like saying that. Anyway. Moving on to the rest of the data. We have got some. The Fed Chair designate Powell speaking. He's due to testify at his nomination. Shouldn't think there'll be too much volatility from that, but it's more awareness that's happening at that time. We do have other speakers. FOMC speaker Harker there is speaking later on, due to speak about financial safety. Now a lot of these things they're highlighted quite high, but in general they create little in the way of volatility, and they're late in our trading day, so the financial stability report for anyone trading in the UK will be well and truly late. However, you're trading across, we do have New Zealand clients, and they may be needing to be aware of that. Volatility around these, as I said, is relatively straightforward. It's a great unknown, but in general, when these happen and the speech comes out later on, I'm sure you're going to find everything's tickety-boo. Anyway, moving on from that point, then we've got tomorrow German CPI and flash CPI for the Spanish. The Spanish data really moves nothing. The German data may create some volatility, and would be more interested in that. Now this does run through the morning session, so it runs. I can't remember the time it actually starts, but they start ticking in. I think from about 7:30 or 8 o'clock onwards through to about 1ish, and when we see the final figure. So. Can create a bit of volatility, not big, 10-15 pip moves sometimes, but it really depends on what he's doing. If it starts moving up higher significantly, well, we could see some volatility there. If it drops significantly, likewise, bigger volatility around that. Now, moving on, OPEC meetings. I was reading from Goldman Sachs that they're expecting, this is a more unknown meeting here. There's a lot of supply in oil. So it's really whether the OPEC members agree to stick to current levels of cutbacks. If they don't, well, this could get a bit of a rocky meeting, but we'll see how it is. They're never straightforward. The fact that Goldman Sachs is suggesting there may be volatility, I wonder what they got to gain from that then. Moving through the day, we've got the second reading of the GDP for the US. Now this prelim GDP tends to have a little bit more volatility surrounding it than the second UK GDP figure normally, because as they've got so many beans to count, it takes a little bit more time to count them and get a more accurate figure, and the tendency is to see a bigger variation from the previous number. So expecting to come in at 3.3. Anything bigger than that, it could create more volatility sitting around there, or anything less, of course, more volatility, but it's certainly got the potential. 1:30 tomorrow afternoon. We've got FOMC speaker there, again, due to participate in a panel discussion. Lower should be really a yellow here, maybe, because they tend to be relatively low key. We've got Carney speaking there then at 2 p.m. due to speak about the Fair and Effective Markets Review and the fixing. Okay, again, I don't see these speakers providing lots of volatility, but we'll see. But I think they're probably overrated in this grading here. Yellen testifying in front of the Economic Committee of Congress. most of what's been said is probably going to be said. She may have more data to take to them. Well, she most likely will have more up-to-date data. So again, we could see some volatility. It's a more significant view will be put together there as she testifies and takes questions. Okay, crude oil inventories, again a Canadian number effectively in terms of the crude oil inventories will affect the Canadian dollar monitoring. Okay, moving through to Thursday. I'm just looking through Aussie capital spending. Nope. German retail sales, maybe a bit of volatility around the 7 o'clock, but not a big mover in any circumstances. Again, I would downgrade that one. At the moment, the European flash estimate CPI, well, we've already seen the German figures out beforehand, so this comes out as a bit of a guide. Again, it's obviously the wider Europe and not just Germany, so we can get a bit of volatility around that, but it's never been massive in recent months. But if that was to suddenly exceed this 1.6, then it puts more potential for more growth, etc., is probably being seen there, and may see the euro rally through the rest of the day there. Excuse me. Current account Canadian dollar, nothing. Unemployment claims, it's a weekly figure. Nothing. Spending. Bomb. Okay, a couple of FOMC speakers later in the day there. Okay, unlikely to create massive volatility. Then we've got the manufacturing PMI. Now this will be a important number coming through on Friday at 9:30. We've seen that it effectively previous numbers they were falling, or so it suggested it was falling in manufacturing production. We'll see what happens. Side of that, Canadian employment data coming out. So got the Canadian data coming out a week before the US data, so it makes it nice and clean to trade if you're looking to trade that on Friday afternoon. And the US manufacturing data coming in at 3, so the main figures coming through there. Okay, the speakers, you can never count for what they're saying, and a lot of them really do not make much in the way of volatility on the market. Right, so technically the euro dollar then. Yesterday we put this shooting star in. We're seeing a follow through of this. Of course, if you catch the video updates I do on a daily basis, morning basis, you can catch those off our website. It will give you sort of more up-to-date data on this analysis each day, because things do change. Like last week we saw on the Wednesday there, it was all change. It was looking bearish, all change. We put a pivot swing in, went bullish. Here we've got a bearish pivot swing coming in. It's towards a near-term top. As I said, there's data coming out this week which could switch this around maybe, but it's currently heading for that weekly pivot, maybe down towards the daily 8, but at the moment erring on the more bearish side there. I should have just come out on the weekly picture just to show you this. And the momentum, it's interesting, momentum's still negative, but that's it takes a long time before it gets properly positive, but it would be interesting. We did see this sort of really strong bar last week. Not surprised to get some sort of movement, and it'll be interesting to see how it reacts off its weekly pivot. If it pulls back off that and starts bouncing, well, we could be looking for the highs there, but at the moment, as I say, shorter term on a daily basis, it looks weaker. Moving on to cable. Again, we've seen some bullish moves on this. I've been talking about it for a while, just been sitting in a tight range. It did break out of the range marginally yesterday and closed back within it, which is, to me, a bit of a weaker signal. Although it really depends on how we're already down to the weekly pivot here. May push through down towards that daily 8. But we'll just see how this reacts. If it manages to close here, starts breaking down, well, we'll get probably a bigger correction back into the range, maybe. At least probably back down to that monthly pivot. There's a bit of space there without any support, so although there are some prior highs, so it could well be a sort of a choppy continuation to the downside. We'll see how this moves, but at the moment both the euro and the pound look a bit like they may be rolling a bit more. Dollar yen, from a weekly perspective, where we broke the lows of that pivot swing last week, that triggered and it does suggest further downside potential. It's short term here, a bit more choppy. There was a bit of divergence into yesterday's lows there on the dailies, which could see, and again we've got the weekly pivot above us here, so could see, just like the others, the potential for a bit of a reversal here at least. I mean, I'm looking towards that weekly pivot at the moment. It's a bit slow, but it's got the potential. Now, it was a real bearish engulfing yesterday, but as I said, the divergence that came with it, well, it just couldn't hold on to its gains against the US dollar here towards the end there, and moved back up a little bit. But as I say, it's followed through. It's still sitting there, quite a strong pairing against the dollar, so, and relatively so iffy downward trend. I'd rather be on the short side if it gets back up to that weekly pivot. I think well, certainly a look at that at the time. Okay, Aussie dollar, it doesn't take much to give up its gains, and well, it started already. I was expecting once it closed back within its band there last week, it may be, and it still may turn around here and push back up towards the upper band, but it's got negative momentum. It looks weak. It's just continued in this weekly downward trend. It has its moments, and it had its moment last week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It moved up. Friday it couldn't do anything. Yesterday pipped up, hit the 21. And again, it looks like, well, we could end up another little bearish pivot swing, which I would then look back towards this S1 and 500 daily 500 area. So at the moment, looking at it in a bearish sort of trend and looking bearish. Aussie dollar, and finally the Canadian dollar. So Canadian dollar, well, it's finding support off that 21, really probably the weekly 8 there's just given a bit of support there. It did, well, it's been really teasing. I had a regression channel on, and it on the dailies I've taken it off. Oh no, I left it on. I was about to take it off. Left it on there. It had been teasing all last week. It finally failed, and it fouled the trend line here. In fact, I'm going to take this. It's a little bit too messy with all this on. I do apologise, but let's just see if we can take that off. Now it's out of the way. So it's into a new sort of bit of price action here. At the moment, it looks like it wants to push up further. It may get back above that trend line, but it had broken that trend line properly. It is a bit softer. I think with the OPEC meetings this week and any other comments that come out around that, will be a bit of a decider on the Canadian dollar. Certainly has the potential to make some quite big moves within it. So at the moment, looking bullish. So it's giving up its gains back against the US dollar at the moment, and it's doing it quite quickly, as you can see. So maybe further upside there. It's already through the weekly pivot, looking, as I say, relatively bullish at the moment. And it could end up on a bullish note today, which again, okay, it may just run back into those highs at 28.33 or 34 sort of area. But if it starts making a breaking through that, well, that 200 still got the potential to be hit. So that's pretty much it for me. We'll just look at the S&Ps after talking about them last week. I did suggest that now wasn't the time to be selling. We keep getting this question, and I continue in the same mode here. Weekly, we ended up in that bullish pivot swing there, very strong at the highs there. I did mention about Christmas rallies, etc. Well, as we pushed through last week, it did look at one stage, I may have been completely wrong, which is always the case, always potential, but it did push up, and it's holding up there, not particularly in the most massive way. I'm sure we'll be starting to see some Cyber Monday data out very soon, and some other figures coming through into the markets a little bit more. There was also already in the US some positive numbers, I think, from Friday, Black Friday, so we'll see if these numbers really can generate a little bit more buzz around this equity market. So we are looking bullish. That's it for me. It's running into 14 minutes at this point. I will wish you a great week. I'll be back next week. Bye for now.